The cafe smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon, but to Ethan, it was the scent of betrayal. He sat at the corner table, his hands clenched around a chipped ceramic mug. Across from him, Melissa looked radiant, though her eyes avoided his. Her glossy black hair cascaded over her shoulders, her red dress too glamorous for an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. She had chosen this place deliberately, public, safe, where she wouldn't have to face the storm she was about to create. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but sharp, "we need to talk." The words hit him harder than a punch. He had known deep down that this moment was coming. The late replies, the canceled dates, the sudden obsession with working late, all signs were there. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked carefully. His voice was steady, though his chest felt tight. Melissa sighed, her manicured fingers toying with the spoon in her coffee cup. She couldn't meet his eyes. "You're a good man, sweet, honest, but you're not enough for me anymore." Ethan blinked. "Not enough?" Her lips curved into a smile, but it wasn't warm. It was cruel in its finality. "I want more out of life, more than late-night ramen and cheap bus rides, more than your small apartment and your dreams of one day." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "I've met someone, Ethan, someone who can actually give me the life I deserve." The words sliced through him. "Who?" His question came out raw. Melissa didn't hesitate. "Daniel Prescott." Ethan's heart stopped. Daniel Prescott was one of the wealthiest heirs in the city, infamous for his fast cars, rooftop parties, and arrogance. The kind of man who had never worked for anything in his life. "You're leaving me." "For him?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. Melissa's eyes finally met his, and they were unapologetic. "Yes, Daniel can give me the world. Luxury, security, status. You can't." Silence hung between them, heavier than the noise of clinking cups and murmured conversations around the cafe. Ethan swallowed the ache in his throat. He wanted to yell, to beg, to tell her she was wrong, but he saw it in her eyes. She was already gone. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. "After everything?" Melissa tilted her head, her expression almost pitying. "Don't make this harder, Ethan. You'll find someone more suited for your level." Level, the word burned. Ethan pushed back his chair slowly, standing with a calmness that betrayed the storm inside him. He placed a few bills on the table to cover both their coffees. When he looked at her, his eyes were cold steel. "I hope he gives you everything you want, Melissa," he said, voice low but firm. "Because you'll never find someone who loved you like I did." And without another word, he walked out. Melissa watched him leave, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. But then her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Car's outside. Let's go shopping." Her lips curved into a smile again, and she chose not to look back. The night air slapped Ethan's face as he stepped outside. He shoved his hands in his pockets, walking aimlessly down the neon-lit streets. He had lost her. To money, to status, to a man who had everything handed to him. But deep inside his chest, beneath the heartbreak, something else sparked, something sharp, something determined. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. 6 months later, the city skyline glittered under the velvet night, skyscrapers piercing the clouds with light. Melissa adjusted her silver gown as she stepped out of Daniel Prescott's sleek black limousine. Flashing cameras immediately swarmed toward them, the society press, always eager for a glimpse of the infamous rich playboy and his newest trophy. Melissa smiled, pretending not to notice how Daniel's grip on her waist was more like ownership than affection. Tonight's event was the party of the year, an exclusive charity gala hosted at the luxurious Sterling Towers penthouse, known to draw billionaires, celebrities, and power brokers from all over. She had fought for this life, hadn't she? The dresses, the jewels, the red carpets. She should have felt proud. Instead, as Daniel smirked for the cameras, she felt strangely hollow inside. "Come on," Daniel whispered in her ear, his breath heavy with whiskey. "Smile wider. You're with me now. Everyone's watching." Melissa obeyed even as her stomach twisted. Inside, the penthouse was a world of gold chandeliers, champagne towers, and live violins. Waiters in black tuxedos weaved gracefully through the crowd, serving drinks worth more than Ethan's entire monthly rent. She pushed the thought away. Ethan was her past. She had chosen better. She had chosen Daniel. "Melissa," Daniel drawled, pulling her toward a circle of wealthy heirs. "Stick by me, don't embarrass me. I've got deals to discuss." She nodded, masking her irritation. He wasn't charming anymore, just arrogant, careless. Still, she couldn't afford doubt. Not now. As Daniel's voice droned on about investments and stock portfolios, Melissa's gaze wandered across the glittering room, and then froze. Her heart skipped a beat. Across the marble floor, under the shimmering light of crystal chandeliers, stood him. Ethan, but not the Ethan she remembered. Gone was the boy with worn-out sneakers and hopeful eyes. This Ethan was different. He wore a tailored black suit that fit like it was made for him. His posture confident, his jawline sharper than she remembered. A glass of champagne dangled effortlessly from his hand, as though he belonged here, as though luxury was woven into his skin. And he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a man whose presence commanded the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features and an easy but powerful smile. Melissa recognized him instantly. Adrian Knight, the billionaire investor, the youngest self-made mogul on the Forbes list. The two men laughed together, clinking glasses like old friends. Ethan leaned in slightly, listening, before responding with that same quiet confidence she had once dismissed. Melissa's chest tightened. No, this couldn't be real. Ethan? With Adrian Knight? Her hand shook as she clutched her champagne flute tighter. Daniel noticed her distraction. What the hell are you staring at? He hissed, following her gaze. When his eyes landed on Ethan, his smirk faltered. Him? That loser? What the hell is he doing here? Melissa didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too busy trying to breathe, as if fate wanted to mock her. Ethan's eyes suddenly found hers across the crowded ballroom. For a moment, time froze. The violins, the chatter, the clinking glasses, all faded. Melissa's throat went dry. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at her, calm and unreadable, before turning his attention back to Adrian. Like she was nothing more than another face in the crowd. That hurt more than any insult could. Melissa forced a smile, pretending she didn't care. But inside, something cracked. For the first time since she left him, she wondered if she had made a mistake. The gala continued in a haze of music and murmurs. But Melissa couldn't pull her eyes away from Ethan. Every detail about him seemed designed to torment her. The sharp cut of his suit, the confidence in his stance, the effortless way people gravitated toward him as though he belonged among the city's most powerful. This was not the Ethan she had left behind. Daniel finally noticed her silence. He leaned down, irritation written all over his face. Melissa, he snapped, quit staring. You're embarrassing me. But Melissa didn't hear him. She watched Ethan move through the room beside Adrian Knight. The billionaire was magnetic. Everyone wanted his attention. But he gave most of it to Ethan. They spoke easily, laughed together, exchanged looks of understanding like brothers in arms. Finally, curiosity gnawed too hard. Melissa excused herself from Daniel's circle and drifted toward the bar, pretending to browse the champagne selection while angling her ears toward Ethan's conversation. Your strategy for Knight Enterprises was brilliant, Adrian was saying, his deep voice carrying across the room. The expansion in Singapore, if I'd handled it alone, I would have burned millions. Ethan smiled faintly. You gave me the opportunity. I just ran with it. Adrian chuckled, clapping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ran with it? Ethan, you turned it into gold. I don't say this lightly, you're the best partner I've ever had. From now on, you're not just an advisor. You're family. Melissa's fingers tightened around her glass until it nearly cracked. Partner? Advisor? Family? Oh, this couldn't be real. Ethan, the man she had dismissed as not enough, was now sitting at the right hand of Adrian Knight, the most powerful young billionaire in the city. She swallowed hard as the truth sank in. Ethan wasn't here as a guest. He was here as someone who belonged. Her chest burned with a bitter mix of envy and regret. Suddenly, Ethan turned his head slightly. Their eyes met again. This time he didn't look away. Instead, he raised his glass in a subtle, mocking toast. A smile touched his lips, cool, controlled, devastating. Melissa felt her face heat. She wanted to storm over, to demand answers, to remind him she had once been the most important person in his life. But before she could move, Adrian's booming voice filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, he called, lifting his glass. Tonight, I want to honor someone who has been the backbone of my company's success this past year. A man of integrity, brilliance, and vision. My partner, Ethan Cole. Applause erupted across the ballroom. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. Ethan stepped forward, accepting the recognition with composed humility. Melissa's hands trembled. Applause for Ethan. Respect for Ethan, the man she had abandoned. Daniel muttered a curse under his breath. Glaring, what the hell? How does he know Adrian Knight? Melissa said nothing. Her pulse pounded in her ears, because deep down, she knew the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that Ethan had risen higher than she ever thought possible, without her, and he wasn't looking back. The gala spilled into its later hours. Laughter and music swirling like smoke around the penthouse. Yet for Melissa, every sound seemed muffled, distant, as her mind replayed one thing only: Ethan's name being announced to thunderous applause. Ethan, her Ethan, the man she had left behind. He was no longer the boy who walked her home in the rain or saved pennies for cheap dates. He was a man now, standing in a circle of the city's most powerful, as though he had been born to it. And he hadn't even looked at her twice. Melissa's throat ached with regret, though she hid it behind her champagne glass. Daniel, meanwhile, was fuming. "This is ridiculous," he snarled, dragging her aside. "That loser must be faking it. There's no way Adrian Knight actually sees him as a partner." Melissa forced a smile. "Maybe he isn't the same Ethan you think he is." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you still care about him." She shook her head quickly, but her silence afterward betrayed her. Later, she found herself drifting toward the balcony, needing air. The city stretched endlessly below, its lights shimmering like jewels. And then she heard his voice. "Still chasing expensive views, Melissa?" Her breath caught. She turned. Ethan leaned casually against the railing, his tie slightly loosened, his gaze sharp as ever. The night breeze ruffled his hair, making him look effortlessly perfect. Melissa's lips parted, but no words came. "You look surprised," Ethan said, tilting his head. "Didn't think I'd end up here?" She swallowed, her pride fighting her shame. "I just didn't expect this." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "No, you expected me to stay where you left me. Struggling, dreaming, hoping, right?" Melissa winced. His words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. "Ethan, But he raised his glass, interrupting her. "Don't, you made your choice. And honestly, I should thank you for it." Her brows furrowed. "Thank me?" Ethan's gaze hardened, though his tone was calm. "Yes, losing you was the best thing that ever happened to me. It pushed me to rise higher than I thought I could, and now I see things clearly." Melissa's heart twisted. He was thanking her for walking away. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You've changed." Ethan's eyes flickered over her, but his expression was unreadable. "So have you, but I'm not sure you'll like who you've become." Before she could respond, Adrian appeared at the balcony doors, grinning. "Ethan, there you are." "Investors want a word." Ethan nodded, then glanced at Melissa one last time. "Enjoy the party, Melissa." And just like that, he walked away. She stood frozen, the city lights blurring through her unshed tears. For the first time, Melissa realized she hadn't just lost Ethan's love. She had lost his respect, and that hurt more than anything. The gala's golden glow was beginning to dim, but tension only grew sharper inside Sterling Towers. Daniel was drinking too much. His jaw clenched tighter every time someone congratulated Ethan or pulled him aside for advice. Melissa stayed silent at his side, but her eyes kept drifting toward the man she once called hers, her pulse quickening every time his low laugh carried across the room. Finally, Daniel couldn't take it anymore. "Unbelievable," he muttered, slamming his empty glass onto the bar. "They're all acting like he's some kind of prodigy. He's a nobody, a fraud. I'm going to put him back in his place." Melissa's stomach twisted. "Daniel, don't—" But he was already storming across the ballroom. Ethan stood with Adrian Knight and a cluster of investors when Daniel barged in, his voice booming. "Adrian, you can't be serious about this guy." Daniel sneered, pointing at Ethan. "Do you even know who he is? He's a broke nobody. He's not even from our world." Conversations around them hushed. Eyes turned. The air thickened with anticipation. Adrian's smile faded as he set his glass down. "Careful, Prescott." But Daniel pressed on, his arrogance blinding him. "I've known Melissa's little ex-boyfriend for years. He couldn't even pay his rent 6 months ago, and now you're telling me he's your partner? He's fooling you." Melissa's heart pounded in her ears. This was a disaster. Ethan didn't flinch, his calm, steady gaze locked onto Daniel. And then, with a voice even sharper than Daniel's, he spoke. "You're right about one thing, Daniel. 6 months ago I didn't have what you had, but the difference between us is that I earned everything I have now. While you—" Ethan paused, his words slicing like a blade. "Still hide behind your father's money and your last name." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face flushed crimson. "You little," he growled, stepping forward. But Adrian's hand shot out, stopping him cold. "Enough!" Adrian's voice boomed, commanding the room. He looked at Daniel with icy disdain. "You think I don't do my homework? Ethan isn't just my partner. He's the reason Knight Enterprises doubled profits this year. Without him, I'd have lost millions. He's more valuable than you could ever dream of being. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed, his arrogance faltering for the first time. And then Adrian delivered the final blow. From now on, Prescott, if you want a seat at any table I'm part of, you'd better learn to respect Ethan Cole. Otherwise, don't bother showing your face. Gasps rippled across the guests. Melissa's heart sank. Ethan hadn't just survived without her. He had risen so high, even men like Daniel were being put beneath him. Daniel turned to Melissa, his face twisted in rage and humiliation. "Let's go," he snapped. But Melissa hesitated. Her gaze lingered on Ethan, who didn't even spare her a glance as he returned to his conversation with Adrian. The matter already dismissed, that indifference cut deeper than any cruelty could. She followed Daniel out, but for the first time she wasn't sure she wanted to. Melissa barely slept that night. The images replayed in her mind on an endless loop. Ethan in that perfect suit. Ethan smiling beside Adrian Knight. Ethan commanding the room with nothing but calm confidence. And worst of all, Ethan looking at her as if she didn't matter. By morning, regret had settled in her bones like frost. She had traded love for luxury, only to discover that the man she discarded had both now, and so much more. She couldn't stand it. She wouldn't stand it. She had to see him. 2 days later, Melissa waited outside Knight Enterprises' towering headquarters. Her palms were damp, her pulse erratic. She wore her most elegant dress, carefully chosen makeup, and her most disarming smile. When Ethan finally appeared, flanked by 2 assistants, she felt her breath catch. He looked even sharper in daylight, confident stride, eyes focused, every inch a man who belonged at the top. "Ethan," she called softly, stepping forward. He stopped. For a moment his gaze flickered with recognition, but it quickly hardened into cool indifference. "Melissa." Her heart squeezed. "Can we talk?" He glanced at his watch, then dismissed his assistants with a nod. They stepped aside, leaving them in the shadow of the skyscraper. Melissa swallowed. "I made a mistake." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh? I shouldn't have left you," she whispered. "Daniel, he's not who I thought he was. But you've changed. You've become everything I ever wanted." Ethan let out a quiet laugh, cold, humorless. "Everything you ever wanted? Or everything you regret throwing away?" Melissa flinched. "I still love you," she blurted, desperate now. "We could start over. I could be by your side again, the way I should have been." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Ethan stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. "You don't love me, Melissa. You love what I've become. The suits, the money, the respect. But where were you when I was nothing? Where was your love then?" Tears pricked her eyes. "I was scared, I thought." "You thought wrong," he cut her off. His gaze was like steel. "Love isn't about choosing the highest bidder. It's about standing beside someone even when they have nothing. You failed that test." Melissa's chest caved. "Ethan, please." But he shook his head. "No, you made your choice and now you live with it. I don't need revenge, Melissa. I don't need to humiliate you. My life, my success, my happiness, that's my answer. And none of it includes you." Her tears slipped free, but Ethan didn't soften. He adjusted his cufflinks, gave her one last glance, and walked away. This time she didn't follow, because for the first time in her life, Melissa understood true loss, and it wasn't Ethan's anymore. It was hers. 6 months later, the city skyline glittered under the night sky as Ethan stood on the rooftop terrace of Adrian, Knight's newest hotel. The grand opening was in full swing below, guests in gowns and tuxedos, champagne flowing, laughter echoing against marble walls. But Ethan wasn't among them. He preferred the quiet above, where the air was cooler and the noise of the crowd softened into music. "Always slipping away from the spotlight," Adrian's voice rumbled behind him. "That's why you're the only man I trust with it." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "You enjoy it more than I do." Adrian joined him at the railing, both men looking out over the glittering empire they had built together. "You've earned this, Ethan, more than anyone else I know." Ethan's gaze softened as it drifted over the horizon. For once, he believed it. Inside the ballroom, Melissa stood among the crowd in a modest dress, far less dazzling than the women who now surrounded Ethan's world. Daniel was long gone, their toxic flame burned out. She had been invited tonight only because of an old family connection, and she wasn't sure why she'd even come. But when her eyes found Ethan across the room later that night, she knew. He looked different, stronger, freer, and at his side was someone else. A woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, holding his arm as though she had always belonged there. She laughed at something he whispered, her hand resting gently against his chest. Ethan looked down at her with a softness Melissa hadn't seen in years. It was a look that used to be hers. Melissa's throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay still, to watch, because deep down she knew this was the end. Ethan had moved on, truly, completely, and she was nothing more than a ghost of his past. Back on the rooftop, the night breeze carried a sense of peace. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting it wash over him. Melissa's memory didn't sting anymore. It didn't matter. He had lost her once, but in truth she had lost him forever. And in that loss he had found himself. The city lights shone brighter, as if celebrating with him. Ethan smiled faintly, turned back toward the party, and walked inside, toward the life he had built, the love he had found, and the future that was finally his.